Some people see Halloween as a night of fun and candy. Others see it as a prime opportunity for outrage. We found 101 of the most pathetic, petty, and profoundly dumb complaints ever filed against spooky season, from HOA meltdowns to baffling 911 calls. This is not just a list, this is a masterclass in human absurdity. 1. A woman called 911, convinced her neighbor was a Halloween cultist trying to send her coded threats. The evidence? He had exactly 7 pumpkins on his porch, and she had just turned 47. She insisted this was an elaborate, gourd-based death threat. The responding officer found no cult, just a man who really liked pumpkins. 2. A complaint was filed with the city council over a neighbor's fog machine. It wasn't about the smell or the noise. The complainant was a meteorology enthusiast who claimed the artificial fog was disrupting the local barometric pressure and ruining his amateur weather forecasts. 3. An HOA in Arizona received a furious email about a decorative skeleton posed in a lawn chair. The resident claimed its smug, bony grin and hollow eye sockets were staring judgmentally at her prize-winning rose bushes, causing them visible emotional distress and potentially stunting their growth. 4. A man called the police to report his neighbor for arachnological inaccuracy. The neighbor had a giant decorative spider on his roof that had only 6 eyes. The caller, an insect hobbyist, insisted this was an insult to the entire spider community and demanded the anatomically incorrect decoration be removed. 5. Someone complained to their apartment manager about a neighbor playing spooky ghost sounds. The complaint wasn't that the sounds were scary, but that they were historically inaccurate. The person argued the wails sounded more Victorian era, when the building was clearly post-war Art Deco. 6. A homeowner was reported for their candy choice. The complaint? They were giving out full-size candy bars. The neighbor claimed this was a malicious attempt to devalue the neighborhood's candy economy and made everyone else who was giving out fun-size candy look cheap by comparison. 7. A man in Florida called emergency services because his neighbor's inflatable black cat decoration had deflated and was draped over his prize-winning hibiscus plant. He claimed the demonic plastic was suffocating the plant and demanded paramedics be dispatched for his flower. 8. A complaint was lodged against a house for its aggressive use of the color orange. The neighbor claimed the sheer volume of orange lights, pumpkins, and streamers was so overwhelming it was giving him a headache and was a blatant violation of the natural color palette. 9. A man filed a formal report alleging his neighbor's bubbling cauldron decoration was actually a piece of covert military-grade surveillance equipment. He believed the small, color-changing light inside was performing unauthorized thermal imaging of his living room through the window. 10. An office manager received a complaint that a co-worker's desk decorations, a set of tiny plastic skeletons, were unprofessional and created a hostile work environment. The reason? The skeletons were not wearing tiny little business suits, which the complainant felt was inappropriate for an office setting. 11. A woman demanded her neighbor remove a classic witch decoration, claiming its long, crooked nose and prominent chin wart were an unflattering and clearly targeted caricature of her own facial features. She insisted it was a case of decorative defamation. 12. City officials received a complaint about a "Beware of Ghouls" sign because the font was not compliant with local signage regulations. The dripping, blood-like font, the complainant noted, was not on the approved list of municipal typefaces for residential display. 13. A family was asked to take down their motion-activated zombie decoration after a neighbor complained their cat had fallen in love with it. The owner claimed the cat would sit at the window purring and meowing at the groaning zombie, which was causing the animal severe romantic frustration. 14. Police were called over a strobe light in a neighbor's window. The caller, a self-proclaimed energy healer, wasn't annoyed by the flashing. He claimed the aggressive light frequency was disrupting his personal aura and throwing his chakras dangerously out of alignment. 15. A formal complaint was filed against a dentist who was giving out toothbrushes and floss instead of candy. A parent argued this was passive-aggressive public health shaming, and that promoting dental hygiene on Halloween was an attack on the very spirit of the holiday. 16. An HOA received a complaint about a fake tombstone in a yard with the name Parker. The problem? The complaining neighbor's last name was also Parker. He interpreted it as a passive-aggressive death threat, even though the homeowner's golden retriever was also named Parker. 17. A man reported his neighbor to the Environmental Protection Agency for their excessive use of fake spider webs. He argued the synthetic polyester fibers were a non-biodegradable pollutant that could potentially entangle and confuse local hummingbirds during their migratory season. 18. A complaint was logged about a neighbor's spooky music playlist. The issue wasn't the volume, but the musical key. The complainant, a musician, claimed the constant use of C minor was musically oppressive and was inducing a state of unresolved harmonic tension in his household. 19. A woman called the police to report a lewd pumpkin. The neighbor had carved a standard jack-o'-lantern face, but she insisted the specific triangular shape of the carved nose was inappropriately suggestive, and the wide smile was unsettlingly flirtatious. 20. A fire marshal was called to a home over a display of jack-o'-lanterns. The complaint wasn't about the candles. They were flameless LEDs. The issue was that the homeowner had not placed a tiny handmade exit sign above the carved-out mouth of each individual pumpkin. 21. Someone complained that their neighbor's ghost decorations, simple white sheets hanging from trees, were culturally insensitive. They argued that portraying all ghosts as white sheets ignored the diverse and multicultural ghost populations from around the world. 22. A man tried to file a noise complaint against a neighbor's decorative raven, which was perched on a fence post. The raven was made of plastic. It was silent. The man insisted it was thinking too loudly, and its judgmental stare was disturbing his peace. 23. A complaint was submitted to an HOA because a neighbor's Frankenstein's monster decoration was only 6 feet tall. The complainant, a literature buff, argued that Mary Shelley's novel describes the creature as 8 feet tall, making the decoration an insult to classic literature. 24. A resident reported their neighbor for property value sabotage due to their house's color scheme. The house was painted with black and orange stripes. The complainant claimed this permanent Halloween aesthetic would make it impossible for anyone on the street to ever sell their homes. 25. Police were called to settle a dispute over a scarecrow. One neighbor claimed the scarecrow's outstretched arm was pointing directly at his house, which he interpreted as a non-verbal accusation. He demanded the scarecrow's arm be repositioned to point in a neutral direction. 26. A complaint was filed against a homeowner for having a Grim Reaper figure that was too realistic. The complainant said it wasn't scary, but that its height and posture were so lifelike it was causing traffic issues, as drivers kept slowing down to ask it for directions. 27. An apartment dweller complained that their upstairs neighbor's walking was too zombie-like. They insisted the neighbor was intentionally dragging their feet and groaning softly to get into the Halloween spirit, but it was just loud enough to be annoying and not scary enough to be fun. 28. A Gothic architecture purist reported a neighbor for putting plastic vampire bats on their Victorian-style house. They claimed the bats were of the wrong species for a Transylvanian setting, and that the plastic material clashed horribly with the home's authentic 19th century woodwork. 29. A woman complained to her building supervisor that a neighbor's projection of a floating ghost was an unlicensed spectral entity, trespassing in her apartment's airspace. She demanded the neighbor either get a ghost permit or cease the projection immediately. 30. A man threatened legal action against his neighbor over a werewolf decoration. He claimed the werewolf looked identical to the one from the movie An American Werewolf in London, and that displaying it without permission constituted a blatant act of copyright infringement. 31. A homeowner was confronted by a furious father demanding to know why his 6-year-old, who was accustomed to single-origin dark chocolate, was being offered insulting, generic candy. The father insisted it was an attack on his child's highly developed palate. 32. The non-emergency line received a call from a man demanding police action against a trick-or-treater. The child's crime? Wearing a firefighter costume, which the caller argued was so unscary, it was actively lowering the overall fear quotient of the neighborhood. 33. a man threatened his neighbor with a lawsuit for atmospheric trespassing. He claimed the neighbor's giant inflatable pumpkin was illegally displacing several cubic feet of air that rightfully belonged to the airspace above his own property, and he wanted his air back. 34. A pirate's skeleton has absolutely no narrative justification for interacting with a crashed UFO. This was the opening line of a formal complaint from a narrative purist, who found his neighbor's lack of a coherent decorative storyline to be intellectually lazy and deeply offensive. 35. A resident reported his neighbor's relentlessly smiling clown decoration for promoting toxic positivity. In his complaint, he argued that the clown's cheerful expression placed an unfair emotional burden on passers-by, who might not be having a good day. 36. An avid golfer sent a cease and desist letter to his neighbor over a green porch light. He claimed the specific shade of green was subconsciously damaging his putting game by making him misread the speed of his own lawn during his morning practice. 37. A mother organized a neighborhood petition against a family using a long PVC pipe to safely deliver candy. The petition claimed the system was dehumanizing the trick-or-treat experience and robbing the holiday of its essential hand-to-hand candy transaction. 38. A man began billing his neighbor for psychological distress caused by a broken motion-activated witch. He argued the unfulfilled anticipation of hearing its cackle every time he walked by was far more stressful than the actual sound ever was. 39. An aspiring novelist started documenting the professional inadequacy of his neighbor's scarecrow, filming crows landing on it as evidence. He claimed their constant cawing was a severe editorial distraction, and the scarecrow was failing its one and only job. 40. An HOA investigated an anonymous complaint about a terrifyingly large spider on a roof, only to discover the complaint was filed by the homeowner himself. He had become too scared to go outside and hoped the HOA would force him to remove his own decoration. 41. This promotes irresponsible pet care imagery. So began a letter from an amateur veterinarian about a neighbor's black cat window silhouette. She insisted the exaggerated arched back was a clear sign of poor spinal alignment that should not be normalized. 42. The owner of a professional haunted house tried to sue a neighbor for predatory pricing and unfair competition. The neighbor had created an elaborate, high-quality haunted garage and was letting people go through it for free, which the business owner called undercutting the local fear market. 43. A man claimed to have a rare, gourd-specific olfactory sensitivity and demanded all uncarved pumpkins be removed from his neighbor's porch. He argued the faint smell of raw, uncooked pumpkin flesh was a potent allergen causing him significant sinus distress. 44. After installing a new satellite dish, a man accused his neighbor of targeted harassment via fake bats. He was convinced the dozen bats were deliberately arranged on the wall to form a subtle arrow pointing directly at his dish, mocking his choice of TV provider. 45. A practicing Wiccan accused her neighbor of unlicensed domestic sorcery. The neighbor's witch decoration held a broom with the bristles pointing down, a powerful symbol for banishing energy. The woman claimed it was actively harming her home's spiritual harmony. 46. A complaint was filed over an insulting lack of fake cobwebs. The neighbor claimed having only one or two strands didn't look festive. It just looked like lazy housekeeping. It's an insult to both Halloween and basic cleanliness, the complaint read. 47. At 8 a.m. on November 1st, a resident reported his neighbor for creating holiday dissonance. The crime was a single jack-o'-lantern still on the porch, which he claimed was emotionally infringing upon the sovereign territory of the Thanksgiving season. 48. A homeowner received a complaint that his cemetery puns were existentially inappropriate. The neighbor felt that funny names on fake tombstones trivialized the profound and inescapable finality of death, and requested a more somber tone. 49. A neighbor complained that a projected dancing skeleton on a garage door was an embarrassment to the entire undead community. A former dance instructor, she stated its poor execution of the Macarena was rhythmically deficient and a disgrace to choreography. 50. A city sanitation department had to mediate a dispute with a man who built a scarecrow from recycled materials. A neighbor had reported him not for the appearance, but for illegally repurposing recyclables as folk art instead of processing them at a designated facility. 51. A man attempted to file a false advertising claim against a party store over a ghost projector. His official complaint stated the projected ghost was offensively opaque and lacked the scientifically accepted quantum translucence of a true Class 4 apparition, making it, in his words, just a floating laundry sheet. 52. Emergency services received a panicked call about a monster actively escaping a residence. Police arrived to find a giant spider decoration on a roof. The caller insisted that because the spider was facing the street, it was clearly fleeing something much, much worse inside that house. 53. A homeowner found a laminated, multi-page document taped to his door. It wasn't a complaint about his howling wolf sound effect, but a detailed acoustic analysis from a neighbor. The document condemned the sonically fraudulent ground-level speaker placement and included diagrams on proper wolf posture for optimal howl projection. 54. A woman rang her neighbor's doorbell for 10 straight minutes, not to trick or treat, but to complain. The Take One candy bowl on the porch was empty, which she claimed was a breach of implied holiday contract, and demanded emotional damages for her deeply disappointed child. 55. He's a ghost. He's supposed to be unseen, one mother yelled at a homeowner who gave her son candy. She furiously argued her child was method acting his ghost costume, and that by acknowledging his presence, the neighbor had completely shattered the boy's character motivation. 56. A history enthusiast threatened to report his neighbor's guillotine decoration to the local historical society. The reason? The blade was made of plastic. He called it a grossly sanitized and disrespectful depiction of revolutionary justice, insisting that only real steel could honor the spirit of the French Revolution. 57. A complaint was submitted to a neighborhood association about a set of large, whimsical garden mushrooms. The resident claimed they promoted unrealistic body standards for fungi and could give local children a dangerously warped perception of healthy mycelial growth. 58. One resident's formal complaint about a neighbor's zombie display was simple. The zombies were too passive. He argued their static poses were intellectually lazy, and that a truly effective display would feature them actively trying to break into the house for a more immersive community experience. 59. Your supernatural particulate matter is clogging my HEPA filter, read the text message a man received from his neighbor. The complaint was about a green smoke bubbling cauldron, which the neighbor claimed was releasing particles that would void his high-end air purifier's warranty. 60. A complaint was sent to the city about a neighbor's use of blacklights as their only outdoor lighting. The complainant wasn't scared. He was furious that the UV rays were making his own white sheet ghost glow, calling it an unauthorized and parasitic illumination of private property. 61. A medical student left an anonymous note on his neighbor's decorative skeleton, pointing out its anatomical laziness. The note highlighted the missing hyoid bone in the neck and pisiform in the wrist, concluding with, "This is an insulting representation of the human form. Do better." 62. Police had to mediate a dispute where a woman demanded her neighbor pay for her dog's therapy. The neighbor had a scarecrow whose head was designed to fall off. Her dog, a golden retriever, kept retrieving the head and was now, she claimed, suffering from decapitation-related anxiety. 63. A parent group tried to get a house blacklisted from the neighborhood trick-or-treat map for distributing apple slices and granola bars. They called it nutritional propaganda and a gateway act to ruining the glorious sugar-fueled traditions of Christmas and Easter. 64. A former engineering student submitted a 12-page report to his HOA detailing the critical structural flaws in his neighbor's inflatable haunted castle. He argued the turrets lacked proper crenellations, making it a disgrace to medieval defensive architecture. 65. A man insisted his neighbor's fake owl decoration was using hypnotic surveillance against him. He told police its large, unblinking eyes were a form of mind control specifically designed to make him forget where he put his car keys every single morning. 66. A local music teacher complained that a house playing the Ghostbusters theme on a loop was promoting unlicensed paranormal extermination. She argued it could encourage children to bust ghosts without the proper training, certification, or liability insurance. 67. This is a blatant mockery of both classic horror and established lawn ornament etiquette. This was the entirety of a complaint filed against a homeowner who had decorated their entire lawn with 24 plastic flamingos, each wearing a tiny custom-made vampire cape. 68. A woman called her internet provider to report an outage, blaming it on her neighbor's fog machine. She insisted to the confused technician that the dense water vapor was blocking the radio waves and physically interfering with her Wi-Fi signal. 69. A resident complained that his neighbor's decorative coffin, with its lid left slightly ajar, was causing him unbearable narrative anxiety. He stated that not knowing whether the occupant was in or out left him in a constant, maddening state of suspense. 70. Police in Ohio confirmed they received a call about a typographical emergency. The emergency was a neighbor's "Trick or Treat" sign written entirely in Comic Sans, which the caller claimed was so aesthetically offensive it was causing him genuine physical distress. 71. An arborist reported a neighbor's haunted tree decoration which featured glowing red eyes. The complaint stated that giving a tree predatory animal-like features was demeaning to the entire plant kingdom and promoted an unhealthy adversarial view of nature. 72. A man demanded his neighbor pay for his cold pizza. The neighbor's yard was covered in realistic zombie outbreak quarantine signs. His pizza delivery driver saw the signs, refused to approach the house, and left the pizza on the curb 3 doors down. 73. A neighbor received a friendly critique from a local art student about her fake blood splatters. The note said the patterns showed a fundamental misunderstanding of fluid dynamics and looked more like a ketchup bottle mishap than a plausible arterial spray. 74. A complaint for aggressive minimalism was filed against a homeowner who only put out a bowl of candy with no decorations. The neighbor felt this lack of effort was so understated it became condescending to everyone else who had spent time and money decorating. 75. A science fiction club filed a formal protest against a homeowner's alien autopsy display. The issue wasn't the gore, but that the alien's internal organs looked human. They called it a shocking lack of imagination and a complete disregard for speculative xenobiology. 76. A clear lack of proper fall arrest equipment was the subject of an OSHA complaint. The worker in question? A plastic skeleton posed as if hanging from a neighbor's gutter, cited for multiple workplace safety violations. 77. Grammatical presumption was the bizarre accusation in a letter to the editor. The writer was furious about a neighbor's "happy haunting" sign, arguing it wrongly assumed his property was actively being haunted at that moment. 78. What happens when a ghost hacks your smart home? One man found out when his neighbor's decoration kept yelling "boo," which his smart speaker misheard as "blue," plunging his entire house into an unwanted blue light show. 79. The victim of textural negligence was a dog, a connoisseur of drop treats. Its owner filed a complaint claiming the waxy texture of candy corn had caused the animal deep emotional and digestive distress. 80. Promoting a narrow, materialistic view of human consciousness. That was the charge from a philosophy professor against a neighbor's zombie. Its singular focus on brains, he argued, was intellectually reductive and ignored the complexities of the soul. 81. Unsportsmanlike decoration. That's what triggered an emergency HOA meeting. A resident claimed his neighbor's use of professional-grade, concert-style lighting gave him an unfair competitive advantage in the neighborhood's unofficial decorating contest. 82. Making an illegal subterranean mineral rights claim was the legal threat a man made against his neighbor. The basis for this claim? A fake tombstone in the yard, which he argued was an attempt to claim the land beneath it. 83. The polyester cape was the first offense. In a scathing Facebook review, a self-proclaimed fashion historian condemned his neighbor's vampire decoration as a historically inaccurate insult to any self-respecting 15th century nobleman. 84. A man demanded his neighbor dismantle a motion-activated jumping spider decoration. His reason? It was too effective. He claimed the decoration had scared him so badly it cured his chronic hiccups, an affliction he had grown fond of and now missed dearly. 85. Thermodynamic irresponsibility. That was the official complaint from an engineer about his neighbor's old-school orange light bulbs. He claimed the incandescent lights were wasting enormous energy as heat, pointlessly warming the autumn air. 86. The Department of Agriculture received a strange report about a giant, inflatable flower monster. A local beekeeper claimed its unrealistic size and color were dangerously confusing his bees during their crucial late-season pollination. 87. Unbearable cognitive dissonance was the alleged psychological damage caused by a garden gnome. A neighbor complained that seeing its normally cheerful face, now dressed as a slasher villain with a fake knife, was deeply unsettling. 88. Acoustic trespassing. That's what a man accused his neighbor of, due to a new high-quality sound system. The spooky creaking noises were so immersive, he complained, they sounded like they were coming from inside his own house. 89. The serene, vibrational energy of the entire block was allegedly being disrupted by a neighbor's strobe lights. A yoga instructor claimed she could feel the chaotic light waves physically interfering with her evening meditation sessions. 90. Paralyzing decision anxiety among children was the bizarre charge leveled against one homeowner. The reason? Their candy bowl was too diverse, forcing kids to choose between chocolate, sour gummies, and hard candy under immense pressure. 91. There is no plausible historical precedent for any haunting whatsoever in this 2-year-old suburb. This was the core argument in a complaint against a ye olde haunted farmhouse theme, which was deemed regionally inappropriate. 92. A permit for a non-traditional atmospheric effect. That's what a neighbor demanded a family obtain for their dragon decoration that puffed smoke. Even though it was water vapor, he insisted it violated local fire codes. 93. It wasn't the scary appearance, but the stereotype that drew a complaint about a witch decoration. A neighbor argued that portraying witches as only interested in potion making ignored their many contributions to herbalism and community organizing. 94. Aggressive solicitation and noise ordinance violations. These were the complaints filed against a child's trick-or-treat bucket. The neighbor was incensed that the bucket itself would light up and loudly yell, "Trick or treat!" at every door. 95. An unregistered spectral aircraft. That's how one man described his neighbor's ghost drone to the FAA. He threatened to report the small drone, which had a sheet over it, for operating in a restricted residential flight zone. 96. The single, tasteful, white-painted pumpkin was apparently an act of war. An anonymous note accused the homeowner of passive-aggressive aesthetic superiority, designed to make everyone else's orange jack-o'-lanterns look common. 97. Could a strong gust of wind cause a fake spider web to ensnare a passing car? One man thought so, reporting his neighbor's extremely long web as a public safety hazard of epic proportions. 98. In the middle of an otherwise terrifying zombie graveyard sat a cheerful, inflatable unicorn. The display was officially reported by a haunted walk organizer for being narratively disruptive and breaking the fourth wall of fear. 99. The improper disposal of a fictional character. This was the complaint against a homeowner who had a slasher villain mannequin slumped in a trash can, which a neighbor called a disrespectful and anticlimactic end for such an icon. 100. A zonal acoustic integrity violation was the high-concept complaint from a man whose neighbor had 2 different sets of spooky sounds playing in 2 different yards. This, he argued, created a confusing and dissonant soundscape. 101. Post-holiday sensory withdrawal. This was the self-diagnosed condition of a man who, on November 2nd, filed a complaint against his entire neighborhood for the abrupt cessation of festive stimuli after everyone took their decorations down. So, pettiness is clearly not a seasonal affliction. Now the floor is yours. What's the most absurd complaint you've ever personally witnessed? Or, be honest, the dumbest one you've ever secretly made yourself? If this descent into madness made you feel slightly better about your own life, a like and subscribe is the best way to show it.